Welcome to Alcohology. I wonder why they call it a cocktail.
Yes, I'd like to know more about the Venus vinifera. I'm very interested in the terroir.
We talking about 2 carbon, 6 hydrogen, and 1 oxygen atom. We talking about ethyl alcohol.
This episode, Guinness. Top of the podcast to you lads and lassies. Today, Guinness. The story begins in 1725 with Arthur Guinness, born in County Kildare, Ireland. His father, Richard Guinness, worked as a steward for Archbishop Arthur Price. In the 18th century, estate households often brewed their own beer for workers and tenants. Brewing wasn't considered a luxury craft, it was infrastructure. Water sources were often unsafe, especially in towns and cities. Brewing required boiling water, which killed bacteria, so beer, particularly low alcohol, small beer, was widely consumed throughout the day. That meant brewing was part agriculture, part food production, and part sanitation. Arthur grew up around brewing operations, grain storage, and fermentation. Brewing wasn't a hobby for Arthur, it was a practical trade. When Archbishop Price died in 1752, he left Arthur Guinness £100 in his will. That might not sound like much today, but adjusted for modern purchasing power, it's roughly the equivalent of $25,000 to $30,000 in startup capital. In 1755, Arthur used that money to open his first brewery in the town of Leixlip. At this stage, he was brewing ale. But something bigger was happening in the beer market that would completely reshape his business. In the mid-1700s, London brewers had created a new style of beer called porter. Porter was darker, stronger, and brewed in large batches. It became extremely popular among working-class laborers, especially dock workers and market porters, which is where the name came from. Porter had several advantages for large-scale brewing. It traveled well, it aged well, and it could be brewed consistently in large volumes. For an ambitious brewer, porter represented the future of industrial beer. Arthur Guinness saw the opportunity. In 1759, Arthur moved his brewing operation to Dublin. There, he signed one of the most famous leases in business history for the brewery at St. James Gate. The lease term, 9,000 years, and the rent was £45 per year. This wasn't a symbolic lease, it was a legitimate legal lease agreement that secured the brewery property for centuries. The location was perfect for a growing industrial brewery. It had access to fresh water from the River Liffey. It was also close to Dublin's port for exporting beer. And it had room for large-scale production facilities. By 1799, Arthur Guinness had completely stopped brewing ale and focused entirely on porter. The strategic decision turned Guinness into one of the earliest examples of specialized industrial brewing. When Arthur Guinness died in 1803, the brewery was already producing more than 20,000 barrels of beer per year. His son, Arthur Guinness II, expanded the operation dramatically. By the mid-1800s, Guinness had become one of the largest breweries in the world. By the 19th century, the brewery was producing more than 1 million barrels annually. Guinness also became known for progressive worker policies. Employees received benefits that were unusual for the time. Healthcare programs, housing assistance, pension, paid holidays. These policies helped stabilize the workforce and make Guinness one of the most respected employers in Ireland. Today, Guinness is sold in more than 150 countries worldwide. The beer is brewed in dozens of breweries across the globe, including locations in Ireland, Canada, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and several African nations. One surprising fact is that Nigeria is one of the largest Guinness markets in the world. Guinness Foreign Extra is extremely popular in Africa, and a large portion of global Guinness production now occurs there. Let's talk about how much Guinness we drink here on planet Earth. Guinness is one of the most widely consumed beers on the planet. On an average day, the world drinks about 7.5 million pints of Guinness. But on St. Patrick's Day, those numbers surge dramatically. On March 17th each year, global Guinness consumption jumps to roughly 13 million pints in a single day. That's an increase of about 73% over your typical day. To visualize the scale of that celebration, 13 million pints of Guinness could fill about 2.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And I can guarantee you wouldn't be able to see the bottom of the pool. What makes Guinness unique isn't just its history, it's also the science behind the beer.
Science!
Most beers are carbonated using carbon dioxide gas. Guinness uses a blend of approximately 75% nitrogen and 25% carbon dioxide. Nitrogen behaves very differently in liquid compared to carbon dioxide. Because nitrogen dissolves less easily in beer, it forms much smaller bubbles. Those tiny bubbles create a smoother mouthfeel, a thicker foam head, and a rich, creamy texture. They also produce that famous cascading waterfall effect seen when a Guinness is poured. Instead of bubbles rising evenly, the beer circulates in the glass. Liquid flows downward along the sides while the bubbles rise in the center. This phenomenon has actually been studied in fluid dynamics research. So when you watch a Guinness settle in the glass, you're literally watching physics in action. Let's talk about that perfect Guinness pour. How do you get your Guinness stout to look flawless? Guinness famously recommends a two-step pouring method that takes place in 119.5 seconds. First, the beer is poured at a 45-degree angle until the glass is about 3/4 full. Then the beer is allowed to settle while nitrogen bubbles form the foam head. Finally, the bartender tops off the pint straight through the foam. The finished head should measure 12 to 18 millimeters thick. The foam acts like a protective cap that traps aroma and helps maintain flavor stability. Now for all you calorie counters out there, let's talk how Guinness stacks up against other beers. A full pint of Guinness contains 125 calories. That's lower than many craft beers. For comparison, many IPAs contain between 180 and 250 calories per serving. Guinness stays relatively light because it is a modest alcohol content at 4.2% and finishes very dry, leaving less residual sugar. The creamy texture comes from the nitrogen bubbles, not extra sugars or fats. So even though Guinness looks heavy, it's actually nutritionally closer to a light beer than most people would ever expect. We talk science, now let's talk
Math!
One of the most surprising contributions Guinness made to science happened in 1901. The brewery hired a chemist named William Seeley Gossett to improve quality control in brewing. While working at Guinness, Gossett developed a statistical method for analyzing small data samples. Because the brewery didn't want competitors copying their research, Gossett published his findings under the pseudonym Student. The method became known as the Student T-test, and it is used in scientific research across medicine, economics, psychology, and engineering. As a matter of fact, this host studied the Student T-test as part of his psychology degree. In other words, one of the most widely used statistical tools in science was invented to help Guinness make better beer. In closing, what exactly is Guinness? It's more than a stout. It's an 18th century business success story, a pioneer of industrial brewing, a global export powerhouse, a contributor to modern statistics, and one of the most recognizable beers ever produced. All starting with a 100-pound inheritance and a brewer who signed a lease that lasts 9,000 years. That's not just a beer, that's history in a pint glass. In the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, Sláinte. I hope you enjoy your Guinness.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.
Want to have a Guinness in Ireland for the next St. Patrick's Day? Call our sponsor, the Poppins Travel Company, at 407-494-4070 or visit them at poppinstravelcompany.com. Would you like to suggest something for us to drink? Give us some feedback or have your brand featured on Matt and Friends Drink the Universe? We would love to hear from all of our listeners. Please check our episode descriptions down below for links to send us a text, support the podcast, and visit our merch store. To keep up with our latest news or share your stellar sips with us, please like and follow Matt and Friends DTU on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and Reddit. For more information about the podcast and links to all of our episodes, please visit www.mattandfriendsdtu.com. That's mattandfriendsdtu.com. Cheers, friends.